Ta-da. Dude, people have no idea how deep this goes. Like, we talk about science, we talk about Einstein, we talk about the birth of modern physics, but barely anyone realizes that so much of that foundation actually came from the Islamic world. I'm not even kidding, man. You go back like 1,000 years, right? Europe's still trying to figure out how to not die from the plague. And meanwhile, Muslim scholars are sitting in these insane libraries in Baghdad, in Damascus, in Cordoba, just straight up decoding the universe. These guys weren't just praying 5 times a day. They were literally breaking down how reality works. Tada, he leans in closer, lowers his voice. You know how he does that. Cha-cha. Like, think about algebra. Bro, algebra, the word itself, it's Arabic al-Jabir. This dude named Al-Khwarizmi. Sounds like a boss from an ancient video game, right? But this guy's the real deal. 9th century. He's writing these mathematical texts that literally give us the structure for equations, formulas, algorithms. You remove him from history, and we don't even get computers the way we know them today. No AI, no Google, no crypto, nothing. He basically gave the world the language that runs your phone. Isn't that wild? And people barely talk about him. Tada, then Joe pauses for effect, like he's tripping out a bit. Tada. And here's the trippy part. Man, Einstein actually acknowledged this. He knew that the kind of math he was using, the precision, the concept of zero, of infinity, of celestial motion, all of that was pioneered centuries before him by Muslim astronomers and mathematicians. These guys looked up at the stars not just to navigate or predict prayer times, but to understand divine order. They saw science as a form of worship. Like, imagine that, doing math and feeling closer to God. That's a whole different level of consciousness. We've lost that connection now. He takes a breath, kind of shaking his head. People always think of science and religion as enemies, but these scholars didn't. They believed that if you understand how creation works, you understand the creator better. So when they studied geometry or mapped the movement of planets, they weren't just doing it for curiosity. It was an act of devotion. That's why their discoveries had soul, man. It wasn't just data or numbers. It was purpose. Chata Joe laughs a little. And then you realize all those things we take for granted, algorithms, algebra, even the concept of the scientific method, they all got refined during what's called the Golden Age of Islam. It's like the original Silicon Valley, bro, except instead of tech startups, you had geniuses like Ibn Sina, Al-Biruni, and Ibn al-Haytham dropping knowledge bombs centuries before the Renaissance. It's like they planted all these seeds that eventually grew into the world Einstein lived in. Teddy pauses again, eyes wide. Ja-ja. And it blows my mind how that whole story got lost. Like, no one talks about it. It's almost like the Western narrative just skipped that chapter. But Einstein didn't forget. That's why when he talked about the interconnectedness of science and philosophy, he wasn't pulling that out of thin air. He was echoing something that Muslim thinkers had been saying for 1,000 years. The universe as a reflection of divine unity. That's literally what Tawheed means. Everything connected, everything balanced. Tell me that doesn't sound like the theory of relativity on a spiritual level, man. Tada, he leans back, eyes drifting as if visualizing it. So yeah, bro, when people say Einstein was this lone genius, sure, he was brilliant, but he was standing on the shoulders of giants. And some of those giants had names written in Arabic. They came from places where the stars were mapped with ink and faith, where every calculation started with Bismillah. And honestly, that gives the story of science a whole different flavor. It's not just human intellect, it's human humility before the creator. Zeta, he taps the mic.
Lets it hang.
Ja-ja.
That's the part people miss, man. Science with spirit, knowledge with heart. And that's what made Islamic civilization's contribution to science so damn powerful. It wasn't just about knowing, it was about understanding why.
Cha-ja. Cha-ja.
Here's what's nuts, man. You look at the world back then, and the Islamic civilization wasn't just doing science, it was living it. Like, they had this thing called the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. You ever heard about that? Dude, it was like the world's first think tank, the original podcast studio for geniuses. They had mathematicians, philosophers, translators, astronomers, doctors, all chilling in one place, bouncing ideas off each other. Imagine a mix of Elon Musk, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and a bunch of Zen monks. But 1,000 years ago, all speaking Arabic and Persian, reading Greek texts, and adding their own fire to it. So he smiles, that this is blowing my mind grin. And these dudes weren't just copying Greek philosophy, bro. They expanded. They took Aristotle, Plato, Pythagoras, and said, cool, but let's actually test this. They invented experiments. Like before the word science even existed, Muslim scholars were doing empirical observation. Ibn al-Haytham, dude, this guy's a legend, basically created the concept of the scientific method. He's out here saying, don't just believe what people say. Observe, measure, test. That's 1,000 years before Europe gets that memo. Einstein would have totally vibed with that, testing reality to find hidden truths. He takes a sip of coffee, voice drops. Ibn al-Haytham, man, they called him Al-Haytham in the West. He's the guy who figured out how vision works. Before him, people thought the eyes shoot out light to see things. Sounds wild, right? And he's like, nah, bro, light enters the eye. He literally built dark rooms and then played with mirrors and holes to prove it. Basically inventing the camera obscura, the foundation for photography. You get that. Cameras we use today, they trace back to that dude working in Basra centuries before lenses even became mainstream. It's like he opened humanity's eyes, literally. Then Joe does that thing where he leans back and lets it settle. And that's what's fascinating. All of this was happening under a system that actually encouraged knowledge. Like, scholars were paid by the caliphs just to learn, just to explore truth. Imagine a society where your main job was to figure out how the universe works, and you got paid for it. That's how advanced it was. Libraries had millions of manuscripts. Students would travel from Spain to Persia just to sit with a teacher. There was this energy, this belief that learning was sacred. That knowledge wasn't about ego, it was about serving creation. He rubs his head like it's tripping him out. Compare that to today, man. We've got universities, but we've lost that spiritual spark. Back then, if a Muslim scholar looked through a telescope, he wasn't just seeing stars, he was witnessing signs of God. When they calculated planetary motion, they weren't chasing fame or grants, they were chasing understanding. Einstein got that. That's why he said things like science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. Dude was quoting 1,000 years of Islamic philosophy without even realizing it. He chuckles almost like he can't believe people don't know this. And what's wild is how interconnected it all was. Like, Muslim scientists weren't working in isolation. They'd write books in Arabic, and then those texts would get translated into Latin. Europe wakes up one day, starts reading this stuff, and boom, the Renaissance happens. You think Newton and Galileo just popped out of nowhere?
Nah, bro.
They were reading translations of Islamic works. Al-Haytham, Al-Khwarizmi, Avicenna, Averroes, these were the names behind the so-called Western awakening. Then Joe gets that serious look. It's almost poetic, dude. You've got one civilization passing the torch of knowledge to another, but over time, the credit got blurred. The story got rewritten. Einstein, though, he was one of the few modern minds humble enough to trace that lineage. He understood that the roots of modern science weren't purely Western. They were universal, deeply influenced by a culture that saw no divide between faith and logic, and that's powerful, man. That's a truth that humbles you. He taps the table, nodding slowly. So when I hear people say, oh, Islam and science can't mix, I just laugh. Bro, they're literally intertwined. They're the reason science became what it is. From algebra to optics, medicine to astronomy, it's like this ancient energy that fueled discovery, and we're still living off that fire. Einstein's theories might have shaken the 20th century, but those ideas, the way of thinking, the curiosity, the awe, they started long before him in the golden domes and dusty observatories of the Islamic world. That's the part people forget, man. Okay, dude. Now let's really go there. Medicine. People think modern hospitals are this brand new Western thing, right? Nah, bro. The blueprint came from Islamic civilization. I'm talking 9th, 10th century. You had these massive hospitals in Baghdad and Cairo called Bimaristans, clean, organized, open to everyone, rich or poor. They had separate wards for different diseases, pharmacies, even teaching sections for medical students. Like, this was 1,000 years before Europe even had a concept of public health care. That's insane, man. Imagine walking into a hospital back then, and it's run by scholars who believe healing is an act of worship. They'd start surgery with Bismillah. That's not superstition. That's gratitude before precision. He shakes his head, grinning in disbelief. And get this, Ibn Sina, also known as Avicenna, this dude wrote the Canon of Medicine. That book was basically the world's medical Bible for almost 700 years. It was used in universities from Spain to Italy to India. Like, even in the 1600s, European doctors were still quoting him. That's how legendary he was. And his approach was scientific, bro. He studied anatomy, psychology, the connection between body and soul. He literally said that emotional well-being affects physical health. Dude was talking about mind-body connection way before modern psychology. That's some Joe Dispenza level awareness in the 10th century. Chada Joe laughs a little, that half-serious, half-amazed chuckle. Cha-cha. And it's not just him. You had Al-Khwarizmi, as the West called him, this Persian scientist who ran hospitals and wrote like 200 books. The guy discovered alcohol as a disinfectant. He was doing clinical trials before the phrase even existed. He'd treat two groups differently to see which medicine worked better. That's straight up scientific method in action. And here's the kicker. When Europe was still treating sickness as punishment from God, Al-Khwarizmi was out there saying, no, this is natural. It has causes we can understand and cure. That's not rebellion, man. That's enlightenment. So he takes a sip of coffee and leans back. Bro, the way these scholars saw the body, it was wild. They saw it as this sacred machine designed by the creator. So studying it wasn't arrogance, it was appreciation. That's such a deep philosophy. Learning about creation to understand the creator's perfection. Like, imagine if modern medicine had that mindset again. If every doctor saw healing as both science and spirituality, that balance is what made Islamic civilization's contribution so strong. It wasn't just intelligence, it was intention. He leans in again, lowering his tone. Ja. And Einstein, I swear he connected with that idea. When he talked about feeling awe when studying the universe, when he said he believed in the God of Spinoza, that's that same Islamic energy. Seeing divine order in laws of nature. You can feel it, the humility, the curiosity, the surrender to something bigger than yourself. It's like all these minds across time, Avicenna, Al-Khwarizmi, Einstein, they're part of the same cosmic conversation, man. Different centuries, same frequency. He taps his finger on the table rhythmically. And bro, the details they knew, it's mind-blowing. Ibn Nafis, another Muslim scholar, discovered pulmonary circulation, how blood moves from the heart to the lungs and back. Hundreds of years before the Europeans figured it out. That's the stuff you learn in biology today. These guys were dissecting, observing, experimenting, all while grounded in faith. They weren't just chasing fame. They were chasing understanding, as they called it, knowledge. Not just to know, but to grow. Yada, he laughs under his breath. Yachow, and it's wild, man. The fact that Einstein and all these physicists were building theories on space and relativity. Those same foundations of observation, logic, and balance were the same ones Muslim scientists set up centuries before. It's like the baton of knowledge kept getting passed down the timeline. Every civilization adding its energy, but that Islamic Golden Age, that's the one that supercharged it all. The vibe was God gave us a brain. Let's use it. And that's such a simple yet powerful concept. Chata, he looks at the camera, eyes focused. Ta-ta! You think about that. And suddenly, the story of science isn't just about progress, it's about purpose. These scholars didn't separate knowledge from meaning, and that's the part modern science sometimes forgets. Einstein didn't. He respected that balance, logic and awe, mind and mystery. And when you trace that all back, you realize the roots of that respect for creation go straight through the heart of Islamic civilization. These guys literally lit the path that led to the modern world. Chacha, he pauses. Long, thoughtful silence. Chacha, and man, that's what I love about history. You start pulling on one thread like Einstein, and before you know it, you're connected to centuries of brilliance from people who saw science as a form of worship. That's not just knowledge, that's legacy. Cha-cha, man, when you really think about it, the Islamic Golden Age was like humanity hitting a creative high. It wasn't just about science or math, it was about perspective. Like, they saw the universe as a mirror of divine order. Everything, the stars, the numbers, the laws of motion, it all reflected something bigger. That's such a beautiful concept, dude, because it means learning wasn't just about control, it was about connection. When they calculated planetary paths, they were literally tracing the rhythm of creation. Chada, he chuckles, shaking his head. And these astronomers, bro, holy hell, they were on another level. Guys like al-Battani, al-Tusi, and al-Biruni, these dudes were predicting solar eclipses with insane accuracy. They built observatories that looked like alien technology for their time, huge stone instruments that could measure star positions down to fractions of a degree. Like, what were they even doing, man? They didn't have telescopes, no electronics, nothing. Just pure geometry, intellect, and faith. You got to respect that. You can feel how serious they were about understanding the sky. Cha-cha, he takes a pause, looks off like he's seeing the night sky in his mind. Cha-cha. And here's the crazy part. Al-Tusi's model of planetary motion actually influenced Copernicus. You know, the dude who said the Earth revolves around the sun, Copernicus literally used Al-Tusi's math. He just Latinized it, cleaned it up, and dropped it in Europe a few centuries later. So technically, bro, the heliocentric model, the big turning point in science, had Islamic roots. Like, the very math that shifted humanity's view of the cosmos came from a Muslim scientist working under a Mongol ruler in Persia. That's the kind of plot twist history tries to hide. Joe laughs a little, that half-incredulous tone. And Einstein would have loved that, because he was obsessed with symmetry, with the elegance of nature's design. The way he talked about the universe having order. Dude, that's the same idea these Islamic astronomers lived by. They believed if the creator is perfect, his creation must follow perfect laws. And they spent lifetimes trying to decode those laws. That's not random curiosity, man. That's devotion on a cosmic level. Cha-cha, he leans in, voice soft. Serious?
Cha-cha.
Al-Biruni. This guy, man, he was insane. He measured the Earth's circumference with just shadows in math, and he was almost dead accurate. Like, how? He also studied time zones, planetary orbits, even speculated about Earth rotating on its axis. 500 years before Galileo. I mean, come on. That's not luck. That's mastery. And he didn't just do astronomy. He studied minerals, physics, geography, anthropology. He even wrote about evolution. Yes, evolution, saying species change over time. This was the 11th century. That's what happens when curiosity meets consciousness. Tata Joe exhales, almost laughing at how little people know this stuff. Oh, that drive. It came from one simple Islamic principle: seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. That's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. That idea lit the world up because it told people that learning was a form of worship. It's wild to think that Einstein's whole mindset, that constant search for truth, his fascination with the mystery behind existence, it's basically the same energy. He once said, most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. Bro, that's pure Sufi philosophy right there. Tada, he points his finger, voice rising with passion. Tada, and that's what blows my mind, dude. These connections across time. Muslim scholars stared at the stars with prayer in their hearts. Einstein looked at space-time and saw God's handwriting. It's the same flame, man, just burning in different eras. And the reason the Islamic world advanced so fast back then was because they didn't separate the seen from the unseen. For them, the cosmos wasn't just math, it was meaning. You'd walk into an observatory and see verses from the Quran carved into the walls. Imagine studying astrophysics with scripture glowing beside you. That's how you balance the brain and the soul. Cha-cha, he shakes his head slowly, that awe in his voice. Cha-cha. And yet, somewhere along the line, that connection faded. The world got industrial, material mechanical. Science turned into this cold system of data and experiments. Still useful, still powerful, but kind of hollow, you know. Einstein sensed that. He missed that spiritual depth. That's why his quotes always sound like he's reaching for something divine. He wasn't trying to be religious. He was trying to be real. Trying to remind people that wonder is just as important as logic. Tada, he leans back again, eyes narrowed. Cha-cha. And when you trace that feeling, that reverence for the universe, it goes back to Islamic civilization. They built the foundation not just with numbers, but with naya, intention. That's what made their science timeless. That's why Einstein could look back, study the stars, and in some way find his ancestors and thought among them. They weren't divided by culture or creed. They were united by curiosity, by humility before creation. And that's the real secret, man. The science of the soul and the soul of science, that's where everything connects. Oh. Ta-da. Cha, man, the deeper you go into this, the more you realize how far ahead these scholars really were. It wasn't just about numbers and stars. They were engineering the future, bro. like actual engineering. You got Al-Jazari, right? This guy was basically the Da Vinci of the Islamic world, except he came before Da Vinci. He built mechanical clocks powered by water, automatic machines, even humanoid robots that could serve drinks. No joke, this was the 12th century, bro. While Europe was in the Dark Ages, this dude in Diyarbakir was out here designing programmable automata. Think about that. The roots of robotics and automation in medieval Islam. He laughs. That, what the hell? Kind of laugh. People always talk about modern technology like it just showed up one day with Silicon Valley. But if you trace it back, those circuits of creativity start way earlier. Al-Jazari was literally inventing gears and cranks, mechanisms that led to engines. His water clocks had complex timing systems that represented celestial movements. So you could say, in a way, he made the first analog computers. Like, no joke, Einstein would have geeked out over this guy. He pauses, takes a deep breath. And it wasn't just machines, man. These people were architects of precision, the kind of geometry and math that built the mosques and observatories. It's unreal. Every pattern, every angle was a reflection of cosmic order. You ever look at Islamic art, dude? The way the tiles form infinite repeating patterns. That's not just decoration. That's mathematical philosophy. It's visualizing infinity, showing how one small design reflects the entire universe. It's symmetry, unity, perfection, all through math. Einstein would have looked at that and gone, yup, that's relativity in art form. He laughs again. And that's what's so wild, man. They had this sacred relationship with numbers. To them, math wasn't cold. It was spiritual. Zero, for example. Bro, the concept of zero came from the Islamic world. You can't even do modern physics without zero. You can't have relativity, quantum mechanics, calculus, nothing. That tiny little circle, sefer, is an Arabic word. That's where the word cipher comes from. So literally, the symbol that holds the universe's equations together was gifted by that civilization. That's the level we're talking about here. Cha-Cha Joe's voice gets lower, like he's letting the weight of it hit. Cha-Cha. And you know what blows my mind, dude? These scholars weren't arrogant about it. They weren't out there saying, look how smart we are. Nah, man. They'd finish their books and say stuff like, if there's any truth in this, it's from God. And if there's any error, it's from myself. That humility, that surrender, it's what made their discoveries so pure. They weren't chasing fame. They were chasing understanding. Einstein had that same energy. He once said, I want to know God's thoughts. The rest are details. You feel that? That's the same soul language spoken centuries apart. Cha-Cha rubs his hands together, getting that intense Joe Rogan flow. Ta-da. And dude, Al-Biruni, I keep thinking about him. This guy wasn't just an astronomer. He was basically the first anthropologist. He studied different cultures, languages, religions with respect, man. Like real curiosity. He traveled to India, learned Sanskrit, studied Hindu philosophy, compared it to Greek and Islamic thought. That's how open-minded they were. The world back then wasn't divided by borders of ego. It was connected through the search for truth. Imagine if modern scientists worked like that today. No politics, no ego, just pure love for knowledge. Ta-da. He leans forward, eyes wide. Ta-da. And here's where it gets even crazier. A lot of these discoveries, man, they were so advanced that Europe didn't even understand them for centuries. Like when Latin translators brought these Arabic texts over, they couldn't even translate half the math properly. That's how ahead the Muslims were. These were people who built observatories, mapped stars, designed irrigation systems, refined metalwork, studied optics, all while Europe thought the Earth was flat. Like, bro, that's next level intelligence. Ta-da. He takes a moment, silent for a few beats. Cha-cha. And you know what's poetic? Einstein lived in a world that finally had the tools to prove what those ancient thinkers could only imagine. He confirmed through physics what they saw through faith and logic, that everything in the universe is connected. That time and space bend, but unity remains. It's like he closed the loop on a journey that began centuries earlier in the deserts and libraries of the Islamic Golden Age. That's why it hits different, bro, because Einstein wasn't just building science, he was rediscovering a truth humanity already knew, that knowledge without humility is chaos, but knowledge with awe, that's enlightenment. Tia-za. He sits back, that satisfied nod, that half smile. Cha-cha. And that's what the Islamic world gave us, man. The blueprint for progress that doesn't forget the soul. The balance between knowing and being. between mind and meaning. That's what made their science last forever. It wasn't just invention, it was intention. And Einstein, knowingly or not, carried that same torch. Man, you start digging into this and it just keeps getting deeper. Like, these weren't just random smart people. This was a whole civilization wired for discovery. Think about that for a second. The vibe of the entire society was built around curiosity. You'd walk through Baghdad, Cordoba, Damascus, and you'd literally see knowledge in the architecture, in the calligraphy, in the way people talked. Every wall, every design was geometry and poetry combined. Like, they lived inside math and art at the same time. It's mind-blowing, dude. Tada, he grins, shaking his head. Tada. And it's not like they had a NASA or some billionaire funding them. No, man. These were regular scholars, teachers, travelers, thinkers, backed by rulers who believed that seeking knowledge was sacred. They'd collect books the way people collect NFTs today. Libraries with thousands of manuscripts, handwritten, carefully copied, passed across continents. Like, bro, imagine being in that time. No internet, no electricity, yet somehow you've got scholars debating the speed of light, measuring Earth's tilt, and drawing maps of the stars that still blow modern minds. Ta-da. He leans in, drops his voice. Ta-ta, dude. Al-Biruni calculated the Earth's radius so accurately that when modern scientists remeasured it with satellites, it was only off by a few kilometers. Think about that. This guy's sitting under a tent in the 11th century using shadows, geometry, and pure patience, and he almost nails the same result that we got with space tech. Like, what are we even doing, man? That level of observation, that's not just intelligence, that's presence. These dudes were tuned into the universe like monks with microscopes. Tada, he laughs quietly, that classic Rogan tone. Tada. And this is where it gets really trippy. These scholars, they didn't separate science and spirituality. They'd study a flower and say, look at how God expresses symmetry through this. They'd study gravity and say, that's divine balance. It's like they saw no conflict between revelation and reason. That's a completely different mindset from how we see it today. Einstein, man, he was one of the few modern scientists who still had that spark. When he said, God doesn't play dice with the universe, that's exactly the kind of statement a 10th century Muslim astronomer would have made. Because they believed in laws. Precise, mathematical, beautiful laws that reflected divine order. Ta-da, he takes a sip of coffee and keeps going. Ta-da. And the thing that's wild is how global that knowledge became. Like, the Islamic civilization wasn't just Arabs. You had Persians, Turks, Egyptians, Indians, Africans, Andalusians, all working together. A truly multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-faith environment. Christians, Jews, Muslims, all studying side by side. Imagine that energy, man. 1,000 years ago, they had what we call diversity and inclusion today, but it wasn't a corporate slogan. It was real collaboration. Everyone brought something to the table, and that's why knowledge thrived. When you remove ego, ideas flow. Tada, he leans back, nodding slowly. You know what Einstein said? He said, the more I study science, the more I believe in God. That right there, that's the echo of that old Islamic worldview. He's not talking about organized religion. He's talking about awe, about that feeling that hits you when you realize the universe isn't random, that there's order in the chaos. That's the same realization those scholars had when they looked through their primitive instruments and saw the same stars we see now. Different centuries, same sky, same wonder. Tada, he pauses, almost whispering, ta-cha! And it's crazy to me how the modern world kind of forgot that connection. We study science now like it's just numbers, data, equations. But those guys, they studied with reverence. Like, imagine taking measurements and whispering prayers at the same time. You're calculating God's design, bro. That's a whole different dimension of learning. That's what gave their discoveries soul. Their science wasn't just about control, it was about communion. And that's what Einstein tapped into when he said he wanted to understand the mind of God. He wasn't talking about religion. He was talking about that same universal mystery. Jojo gets that faraway look, like he's seeing it all unfold. Tejaso, dude, if you think about it, the story of Islamic civilization's contribution to science isn't just a story about math or medicine or astronomy. It's a story about mindset, about what happens when you mix logic with love, when intellect kneels before truth instead of ego. And the fact that Einstein, the most famous scientist of modern times, resonated with that, that tells you something deep. It means truth doesn't belong to any one time or place. It travels through consciousness. It finds anyone who's open enough to listen. So he taps the mic lightly. Ta-da. And that's the real trip, man.